מתחילה? זה?
כן, I guess. איך אבל פותחים תמיד? מה, הידענו?
תפתחי שאת רוצה, ואז אם זה לא זה, אז מקסימום חותכים.
אוקיי.
כאילו, אבל יש את הפתיח, נכון?
נכון.
שזה...
Welcome to the Fuck It podcast. The podcast where we gotta
join
us and fuck it.
נכון.
היי דניאל. לא.
סאו!
איך פותחים? אוקיי.
כאילו...
אוקיי.
כן, you got it. אחד זה שלי, אוקיי, זה סבבה? כן, כן, הקול שלי סבבה, נשמע סבבה?
כן.
אוקיי.
ותזכור קצב גבוה יחסית, לא...
קצב גבוה של דיבור.
לא, כאילו, כן לדבר בקצב שלך, זה, אבל גם כאילו להיות מיינדפול, לשמור על איזושהי אנרגיה.
כן, אנרגיה, כאילו...
Okay. So I want to start this episode with a sharing / contemplating I've been having since we recorded the last 2 episodes. Basically, I'm trying to understand, like, we have a mission. We want people to be more, we want us to be more open, authentic, vulnerable. And this morning I've been thinking about this idea of vulnerability and opening up to strangers and people that maybe know me but they don't know me so well. They know us, maybe they know our stories, maybe they don't. We're choosing to share a lot of ourselves in a very open way. We're exposing ourselves to judgments and criticism, and it's okay, it's part of it, and I know it's something that I want to encourage in life for others, for myself, but I'm trying to understand why, like the deep reasoning of why is it worth it? Why is it really worth it to be vulnerable? What do you get from it? Maybe it's not worth it, putting a question mark on that, like what is it? And I wanted to ask you what you think about it, because you are someone that I look at and I see a lot of vulnerability. It can be in personal conversations, it can be in the way you chose to expose yourself. For example, when you made a choice, like I think it was 6 years ago, you went out with your personal story of sexual assault. Which is hard to do in general, but especially as a man, as an Israeli man. And you were always kind of, for me, ahead of the curve in terms of vulnerability since you decided that it's part of your life. And I'm curious to really ask you how you see it and how do you experience it, maybe?
So, I think it's something that I'm learning as I go along, because it's not something I knew, and there's like the Renee Brown TED Talk about vulnerability, which I only watched many years later, and first of all, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it's just the truth. It's real. Being vulnerable is exposing and expressing parts of myself that are real. And yes, I think when there's something that is hidden and I'm afraid to share it, that's when it's even more real. It does get easier over time, but I think for me there was so much, and still is a lot of judgment towards different parts of myself, but over time I think there's become like a lot more acceptance. I've been doing a lot of healing work around parts of myself that I don't accept or that I have judgment towards. And it's like one of the final steps towards self-acceptance, or if not the final step, coming out and speaking about what it is that I'm afraid to speak about. And so if there's something that I have judgment towards myself, and then I'm working through it and I come to terms with it, or even begin liking that part of myself, then the next step is speaking about it, because I shouldn't have any reason to be embarrassed about it. Now, it still can be tricky, because even if I'm true to myself and I believe that what I'm gonna say is truthful, people might not agree with that, and people might have comments, and people might judge me for that. And so I think judgment from others is so much more hurtful and powerful when I'm judging myself. But if I'm accepting that part of myself, then the judgment of others doesn't hurt as much, and over time it doesn't even touch me, because I know that I like this part of myself, or this is what happened. I accept it. So if, for instance, you're speaking about sexual assault, so for many years I had a lot of judgment, a lot of questions about, maybe I let this happen in some way, maybe I'm weak because of it. How did I not fight back? How did I freeze? What will people say? But the moment I learned that it's just part of the process, and it's a trauma response, freezing, and it's not weak, then when people did say hurtful things, I didn't believe them, because I wasn't believing it within myself. And
so you think, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but do you think that it's only available to people once they accept themselves? What if I don't accept myself? What if I judge myself? So I don't have permission to be vulnerable until I accept myself? Because maybe, no, I have shame around things that I feel. I have judgment towards myself, and then I'm gonna say something about it, and people are gonna point it out and say you're this and that, and you actually agree with that. So why would anyone want to do that to themselves? And I don't know, like I'm missing something that, I get it, but at the same time I don't get it.
Yeah, and I question myself also over time, but I think just, the reality has shown me that it's always paid off. But I agree with you. I think definitely before coming to terms with myself, if you still have judgment towards yourself, or I still have judgment towards myself, then there's more of a risk, because I'm exposing something that I'm not fully accepting within myself, and then different ideas of people can confuse me, can deter me, and make it worse. But there is an upside that, okay, first of all, I want to ask if you have an example of something like that.
No, actually, I want to ask you, like, maybe we jumped very fast to it, but how do you see vulnerability? What is vulnerability to you?
So vulnerability to me is, there are different ways, but like I said, it's being authentic on the inside, on the outside, as much as I'm in the inside. For instance, it could be something small. It could be like when someone says, "Hey, how are you doing?" Right? And most of the time, we answer like, "Yeah, all's good." But maybe I'm having a shitty day, so I don't share that, because I don't want to burden someone, because I'm embarrassed, because I want to look strong, because I want to. So there's a spectrum between saying everything's okay to spilling my beans onto someone who's just passing by and is genuinely interested in me. But if I say like, "Oh, I'm actually having a pretty shitty day," then they could be like, "Oh wow, that's authentic." And then they could be like, "Do you need a hand?" Or maybe they'll be like, "Okay, I don't have anything to do with that," but at least there's something real. Like if we're in this world walking around just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm good," but really we're not, then that's a small example of not being vulnerable and not being authentic. And that just continues, and that builds up and creates more and more authenticity. And then it goes up to, crying in public. That's more extreme, okay? Because right now I feel that I want to cry. Right now, we've been in restaurants and we're talking about something, and then the tears are coming and I feel like I want to cry. In the past, I would block it. But I would block it because I would feel embarrassed, because I would feel that there's something wrong with crying. So I had to work through my judgment and society's judgment towards crying in order to bring me to a place where I can cry in public. Now, why is it good, you ask, to cry in public? Yeah, someone can point and laugh. But I know now that if they're pointing and laughing, it's just their self-judgment towards themselves. I know now that they're feeling fear towards expressing crying. And why is it good for me? Because right now I feel the need to cry. And when I cry, there's a huge release. It's just like if I have a shit that I need to take, if I have diarrhea or something, then if I don't go to the toilet, it's going to be hurtful. And that's how I see emotions and crying. And even so, that person sees me crying, maybe they feel judgment towards me, but maybe other people or even them will say like, oh wow, this person is normalizing it. If this person is doing it, and then another person does it, and another person does it, and it causes ripples, then people will feel more okay with being vulnerable.
Okay. I get that, but I want to ask you, I'm going to challenge you a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Or not challenge, but just ask you when was the turning point for you? We know each other for like almost 15 years. The first years of us being together, you weren't. I mean, you were vulnerable with me, and I think that's why we connected, because I felt like you were willing to open up quite fast with me, and you shared things that happened to you with me, and I felt like we have trust between each other. But at the same time, like it took you a few years to become more vulnerable publicly, let's say. And I'm curious to ask, what was the turning point? Was it something that happened gradually? Was there someone that inspired you to do that? Like, how did it happen for you? Because now you're so natural about it, and like literally you're crying in a coffee place in the middle of Bali, and it's something that would never happen 10 years ago. So interesting.
I'm sure it was a process, but I'd say that if I can pinpoint the turning point itself, was I was in a really bad place in my life. I was working 10 hours a day. Everything was seemingly perfect in our life. The job, the apartment, Tel Aviv, friends, the money. But something huge was missing, and I was feeling depressed. And I couldn't pinpoint. And a friend said, hey, there's this workshop that my friend just did, and maybe it'll interest you. And I saw the website, and it looked really like unprofessional, because I came to learn that it's an organization, it's not a company or anything, so they don't have much money.
A
nonprofit.
Yeah.
But something about it was really authentic to me. So it called me, and I signed up right away, and it was called It's My Choice in Israel. And there I felt supported in a way that I hadn't felt supported in such a long time. And basically it's a workshop that kind of teaches you and shares with you ways to connect with the full spectrum of emotions, and takes you through anger and sadness and happiness and love, and has different exercises. And it's just 2.5 days, and it was really, really transformative for me, because it got me to a point in life when I was so disconnected from myself, and I wasn't being vulnerable, allowing myself to be vulnerable with myself. And so, connected to what you said about this, about speaking up about sexual assault. So I had not spoken up for 6 years. It happened when I was 16. I didn't speak up till 22 about sexual assault, and I only told you after 6 years, and my parents and a few close friends. And I carried that. And I went to psychologists for a few sessions, and I was like, okay, now I'm good, I'm fine. But I didn't speak, and I didn't share this with anyone, because I still had a lot of shame and embarrassment around it, because I felt that, how could this be? I come from special forces. I'm a grown man. How did this happen to me? And they taught us, one of the exercises there was allowing ourselves to express anger. And anger for me was always I always, anger equaled violence for me. And if you remember, anytime you would raise your voice or be enthusiastic about something in an almost angry way, I would shut down and I couldn't accept it. And for me, coming in childhood, I experienced anger in a more violent way. And so for me, I couldn't differentiate. And one of the exercises that they had there was basically, they said, choose someone from the crowd and that resembles someone that you're angry at. It could be a mother, a father, a perpetrator, a teacher. And the face of my first perpetrator just kind of popped up. And I called him over and I allowed myself to express anger for the first time. I was just screaming. They teach you to scream from the stomach, not touching them, no violence, just screaming. I am angry, over and over again. And I started crying. And like snot was coming out of my nose and tears were running down. And there were groups and everybody was there. And I just kept going because I realized I still have so much anger built up that I didn't allow. And everybody was sitting down and everybody was just watching me. And I opened my eyes at the end and I was like, whoa. And the facilitator came to me and she's like, what are you angry about? And I whispered to her, I was sexually assaulted. And then she said to me, do you care sharing with the room? There were 80 people in the room. And I said, no way. It's too scary. And then she said, you have a choice. You don't have to, but maybe. Maybe it'll help someone. And so in that moment when she said that, it kind of didn't remove me from the equation for myself, but I was like, okay, wow, maybe I do have a responsibility here. And so I shared for the first time my story in front of 80 people. And I was crying. I could barely speak, but there was this complete silence in the room, and all eyes were on me. And there were people standing behind me, putting their hands on me, supporting me. And it was the complete opposite of how I imagined a scenario like this of being vulnerable. And I finished, and there was complete silence. And I felt the compassion, I felt the love. And then different people approached me, and there was one girl who said that, she just realized from my sharing that she had been assaulted when she was a child by her neighbors in a car, and she never spoke about it. She didn't realize till this moment. Another woman came to me, she said, you're so brave. I said, I'm brave. She said, yeah, I just want you to know my father raped me for 5 years when I was a child, but you're brave. And I was like, oh my God. Maybe I am courageous to speak up, and this is giving, power to others to speak up because they feel that they're not alone. And then the more I had to dive more into it because it was part of my reality. The more I read about it, and I noticed just how many people are hurt and abused sexually, physically, and it almost doesn't surpass anyone. Almost every person, like every woman, 1 out of 5 boys and men, but when we're not vulnerable about it and we're not speaking about it, we're in fear, then we're isolated. I was isolating myself, and I felt all of this. And the moment I spoke up, first of all, it helped me to normalize myself, and people were courageous enough to meet me and say like, hey, I've been through this as well. Hey, you're normal. And then at the same time, it just gave power to other people, and I was like, oh wow, I've been telling myself this story of being a victim this whole time, and my power taken away from me, and I'm weak, where now I can actually turn my story, my shit, so called, into something powerful that can do good in the world and help people. So that was a turning point. That was really, really empowering and powerful. And then, yeah, the next step was when you said, why don't you speak up about it? And then I wrote a post about it, and yeah, and it was just on a larger scale. And it's been a process ever since. And sometimes it's easier on social media than in person, and sometimes it's easier in person.
What do you feel now sharing it?
I felt a lot of emotion during. Now I feel like a more of a lightness. I felt a lot of energy moving through me. I feel pride in a good way to look back and see the process that I've been through. I feel excitement. I feel joy. Because it's heavy not to share, not to speak up about these things. And it's like, yeah, I think we mentioned it, but like people who are in the closet around anything, but the more well-known scenario is homosexuality or LGBTQIA community. And yeah, that's being vulnerable. That's being true to who you are, coming out of the closet, saying this is who I am, and I will suffer the consequences of this or not. But I feel like not being vulnerable, not sharing who we really are, these parts of ourselves, then there's a lot more suffering. It's just like not accepting myself is, yeah, it's horrible.
Oh, yeah. I feel so much gratitude hearing you, and I also feel very emotional hearing you. It really touches my heart, and when we keep moving, we don't really always stop to realize what we've been through and what you've been through. And for me, it's your sharing, or in general, vulnerability is so sacred. It's so sacred to tap into the realness of your inner world, and to feel safe in that space, to feel seen. And for me, when I'm hearing you, I'm hearing that grace of vulnerability, the merit that comes with allowing ourselves to really expose who we are from within in a certain moment where so many things, it's not like what you shared is everything that you are. You're so many things. And even that story is just a part of you, but the fact that you can share it and share the emotions that come with it, and you feel safe, and like you said, you felt safe in that room, maybe for the first time in your life, meeting all the fears, all the stories you had maybe around the judgment or the rejection that you would feel if you would ever share this to anyone. And to see that not only it's okay to share what you feel and what you've been through, you're not only, it's not only okay, it's actually great, and it's supportive, and it's expansive to yourself and to others. It's like a ripple effect. So I feel like when you share your story, or when I observe people share their vulnerability, I feel inspired. I feel, like you said, I think the essence of what you said is the power that it gives to you and that it gives others. And I feel like there's a difference in the way we share, and also in the way we perceive and like categorize it in our mind. And I want to explain. It's like sometimes we were taught that the way to share is to kind of like victimize ourselves for what we feel, and then vulnerability is like almost associated with victimhood, where like sharing what you're going through is being a victim, versus understanding that vulnerability is actually tapping into your power, because you're not just here to complain about things and to cry over spilled milk. It's actually tapping into your deeper emotions, and when you do that, you're connecting to your power, to the power within you that allows you to do that. Because I think that on the deeper layers, we have a lot of fear of feeling certain feelings, so we just repress them, we put them aside, we move on, we create this like persona that is powerful, that is like moving forward, and then a lot of parts of ourselves are being neglected. And when we connect to that ability to tap into the deeper layers of our feelings, suddenly you feel liberated and you feel celebrated and seen. And I think it has a lot to do with the framing we give to our story, to our emotions. Is it a story of like, feel sorry for me, or shame that I'm a man, that it happened to me as a man? Or do I feel power that it happened to me? I don't know why. I don't think there's any way to say like sometimes we spiritually bypass by saying like, yeah, it all happened for a reason. I don't wish anyone for that, in order to grow and feel connected to their power. But when it happens to you, when life happens to you, and everyone has something they've been through, but when we tap into the power of our story and we're able to share that with others, we're connected. We feel part of, we feel seen, we feel loved, we feel supported, and we feel like also like we're empowering. So it's like it's giving so much, like you said, that energy in the room that's being built up when we put aside all the stories that has to do with exposing ourselves. And I think it's a like what you experience is like a lab of things that can happen in real life. Not everyone will go to these workshops, and we talk to people that like we tell them about this workshop and they're like, oh my god, like they cringe, like they can't even think about it, or worse, they laugh about it. They're like, I would never do such a thing. Or even the next step, like even saying like, why would I do that to myself? Like, I don't believe in sharing all these things. I feel weak. Like so many people literally feel weak when they share their emotions, and they're doing everything to prevent that. So for me, when you're sharing that, it's like it's a reminder of what it can do to you. Like why doing that is not risking anything. It can actually empower you. It's not gonna make you weaker, but it's hard to explain it to someone who's never experienced it.
Yeah, and I think that is why it should happen in small steps. And these workshops, I think they are for everybody, but like if you would have told me about this workshop a year before, I would have laughed in your face. Like I had to go through a certain process or reach a certain extreme of depression, feeling low, in order to be like, okay, I'll do this. But like I said, I think it's the small things. And first, yes, we have to work around those strong emotions and understand why we're feeling so much judgment towards our emotions. And it has to do a lot with education, lack of education around emotions, and it's not new to anyone, but like the sayings of, don't be a little boy, don't be a little girl, stop crying, put yourself together. And if only as children we were allowed to express our emotions fully, and I'm sure many do, but I still think that the majority of the world is not there yet. And And so if it was just normalized from a very young age, then it would be normal and there wouldn't be that judgment. And I think, for example, like the example that I said before about, oh yeah, I'm fine, it goes to, I think it's, maybe we spoke about it already, but it becomes much worse on social media because it's even easier to hide there behind like pink facade of everything is perfect. And what happens is, and I see this with me and with you, like how many times would you be scrolling on Instagram or Facebook and feel suddenly shitty about yourself, even though you're on the beach in Goa, but then you see like this, but you're having a shitty day, and then you see people in the Caribbean or in South America, and then you're like, oh, they're happy. Everybody's happy except for me. But it's not true. It can't possibly be true because we are human, and if we all shared, and I think another thing is that we're afraid to burden, and we're afraid that other people would burden us. I have so much shit to deal with, so now if someone's going to be vulnerable with me, then now I have to hold them. Now I have to support them. And I want to say that 80-90% of the time, just sharing openly with someone without them judging, without them reacting, without trying to fix anything, it solves it. Like, it doesn't solve, I mean, it goes away. The emotion passes through. I feel supported and seen. I don't need someone to hold me. I just need someone to accept. And I just want others to be doing the same. And then if I see that other people are also going through similar things, it's not that I'm happy, oh yeah, they're also having shitty, but they're also human. And then I feel more normal about myself. And then my shitty morning is toned down. I don't feel it as dramatic.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think that, like, what you said reminded me that for me, vulnerability is a way to connect. When I'm able, every time I feel isolated or disconnected from people around me, I notice that it has to do with the fear of being vulnerable. And every time it's like, it doesn't matter how many times I've done it in my life, it doesn't matter how open I am, I notice how when I start interacting with people, like I'm quite open, I feel like I'm a quite open person, and still I have these inner layers that are kind of like protecting me. I think they are protecting me, but they're also isolating me and putting a barrier between me and others. And every time I hit that point where I'm dropping that and I'm being a bit more vulnerable, I feel so much closer to the other person, to the people around me. And sometimes it feels scary, like especially I remember for me working in a work environment, right, when you're supposed to be very professional and it's not about like being emotional in work, you have to go to work and get the job done. But for me, again, it's like, how can, for me, I couldn't wrap my head around it that I go to work and I need to make like a separation between myself and my work environment. And for me, my way to connect is being vulnerable, and I felt like by doing that, I'm exposing myself to judgment, and like I will be perceived as less professional for sharing my vulnerability at work. I couldn't help it, yeah. I would go to meetings with my boss and my colleagues, and I would cry and I would share what I'm going through because it's who I am. But so many times I felt out of place, and like there is no space for that in work. There's only space for that in a workshop, in a hippie community. And I don't know, I feel like I have a message to the world, like how can we embrace vulnerability as a language that is allowed in everywhere. And saying that I'm vulnerable about something or sharing how I feel doesn't mean I can't share it and then regroup myself and continue working as I should, because right now I'm going through something, and pretending that I'm not is like isolating me and actually making me more depressed and more disconnected and less motivated. Like for me, I was trying to shut it out, and I was also feeling like depressed and stressed and scared and overwhelmed and overworked. And I felt like, okay, I need to suck it up and be professional, and I'm gonna put on a smile. I would go around, cry, around the office and go up with like my red eyes and pretend nothing happened because I need to be professional every single day of the week. And then it's like you're crashing because you're all the time holding, all the time you have to hold this figure that, okay, that's, I'm talking now about highly sensitive people. I think some people are less sensitive and they really like they're disconnected. They don't have the same mechanism. But I'm like, I feel like so many people are, and they don't have a voice, and they're kind of transparent in this world that we live in. And unless they put themselves in a situation where it's normal, like you said, normalizing, then there's no space for it. And I think I'm coming back to this topic because in a way, I ran away. In a way, like, I needed freedom for my vulnerability, and I felt like it's not safe in my day-to-day environment, so I wanted to run away and go to India so I can feel free to cry in front of people, and I could just be my full sensitive person that I am. And my personal journey took me to a place of like self-acceptance from shame, and always feeling like I was less, like I felt less worthy of others. I felt like people were stronger than me, and especially as a woman, like I would look at women that were like more closed emotionally as more powerful, and I felt weaker compared to them. So I was like, okay, so I need to go to India where I can just be myself and not apologize for it. And it helped. It helped. Like, I went through a huge process of self-acceptance, but at the same time, like, no, I want us to be able to be in a society where it doesn't matter where you live to be vulnerable. And if you want to do that, you can do that, or connect to those parts of yourself that are going through something. Every time I do that on social media, I get a few messages of like, thank you for normalizing things that we feel, but we feel ashamed, and we feel like there's no space for it because on social media it's not a safe space. Or
It's really, it's amazing what you're saying, and it's really surprising in a way, because coming back to your first question, like what was the turning point? So it was that workshop, but the build up to that was that I had a safe space at home with you. Like, you were the one who always encouraged me to be more vulnerable, even if you didn't know exactly what it meant. And we all have emotions. We were all born as children. We all cried as babies. We all had emotions, and over time we blocked them and put on like a fake strong facade. And you, maybe being, I would say, like you just said, an oversensitive person, many times it just, you couldn't control your emotions, which I think is a gift. You felt that it was a weakness many times because that's how others perceived you, and that's what people told you, like you said, at workplace. But I think it's a gift because it just kind of allowed you to express that. And so for me, I was always battling. You would be like, be more vulnerable. Maybe you didn't say it in those words, but that was the encouragement. I was always like, no, leave me alone. Like, share more. I don't know what, express your anger. And I was like, no. But it allowed me to, the fact that I had that at home and I knew that you would be accepting of it, it allowed me to go to this workshop. It gave me like that safe kind of place to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that and remind you of that, and thank you for that I felt safe. And you said that, vulnerability helps you feel closer with others. So if we're talking about relationships, especially friendships, that's with family, but especially romantic relationships, like, I can't even begin to explain the closeness that we feel, the intimacy that we feel now as compared to before I allowed myself to be vulnerable. And I think the more I became more vulnerable, it kind of allows you to be more vulnerable, and that creates closeness. Coming back to the first point that I said, it's because it's truthful. because we are expressing authenticity when we are being vulnerable. If we are now in a conversation, if we are hugging, if we are in sexual intimacy, and I'm not being present and I'm not sharing what it is that I'm going through, then there's a disconnect and we are not connecting. If I'm embarrassed to share what I'm going through right now, even if it will upset you, even if you might feel many different things, if I'm hiding that, then there's a disconnect. And so bringing that and being vulnerable, being courageous, creates a closeness over time and more intimacy.
Yeah, I think many people, I think we're all just trying to feel good, right? We're all just trying to find a way that will feel good in life. And many times it's the thing that makes us feel uncomfortable is the thing that is going to lead us to feeling good in life. It's not going to be like anything we can buy or anything like we're going to get another achievement and it's going to feel good for a minute, but this is like coming back to simplicity and courage. I think it comes down to very like simple tools where you can actually start stepping in slowly, like you said, in steps into a space where you're checking in with yourself. Is it possible to me to open up just a little more? Because people don't realize how much they're preventing themselves from feeling good because they hold on to like the rejection or the perception of what would happen to me if I open up. So especially like you said in relationships, especially like at the beginning when people are trying to discover one another and you're trying to understand who's in front of you, but you're not getting the real story, then you feel the disconnection, and then people like give up and they break up, and again this whole cycle of like frustration and feeling lost and confused or just like fearful and uncomfortable with sharing yourself. And just I feel like it's almost like people who can't see me, it's like all the time walking with your hands closed and you're not free. And there's something about allowing yourself to speak up and say what you feel and say what's going on for you, and it can change all the time, and see that wow, actually like nothing happened. Like it just made me feel like freer, when you share something that was on your chest and you're like, oh my god, I said it, and then all the things, all the buildup that you had in your mind is dissolving. Or you could be surprised also, like you would share something and you would be surprised at what it does to the other person in front of you. So I feel like there's so many reasons why yes, it's worth it. And I think the reason I'm such an advocate of it is because I felt personally how it affected our lives, but I want other people that maybe are different than us that are listening to this episode will be like, how is it worth it also for them to do this kind of like practice of sharing more. I was speaking to a very close person in my life a few weeks ago, someone that was very fearful of sharing, like very, very fearful of sharing anything personal, and something happened and it forced them to come out and speak up. And the things that it does to a person when you realize you have a voice and you're allowed to express yourself fully, and the people who are meant to be in your life will cheer you for that, and the people that are judging you will just like dissolve and will not be part of your field anymore, your consciousness field. It's worth it because your life becomes more aligned. You feel more connected. You feel like more self-acceptance, right? There's all these self-help books about self-love, self-acceptance, compassion. This is it. This is how you do it. Like when people are asking like, how do you do it? How do you get to a place where you can feel like more ease in yourself? That's the way. That's the way to do it. To create that inner voice that says, hey, it's okay. Whatever you went through, it's okay. All the deepest, darkest parts of you that you're so judgmental of, it's okay. And having this inner talk is allowing you to feel safer to open up, open your mouth, share what you're going through, give us something, so we can know where you're at. And at the same time, I'm working on myself on a personal level on how to connect with people who are really scared to do that. I feel like so many times I can think of people in my life that I'm just rejecting because they're not showing up in vulnerability the way I want them to. And how can I develop more compassion towards this closeness that they bring up, and seeing them with more like love and not just reject them because they're not being able to be as vulnerable as I would like them to. So it's another process of accepting others and not just saying, you know, only the vulnerable people are allowed in my life.
Of course, and I think that's like two small things that I wanted to say. It reminds me of, yeah, vulnerability doesn't mean, like I said, just blurting all of our shit onto anyone and everyone at any point. Obviously, if that's what you want to do and that's what you feel, do it, but that's not what I'm saying. There is also respecting the other person and where they're at. Not everybody is ready to hear, but it's the fact that I am ready and okay to share if there's someone that's needed, and it's maybe asking someone before sharing, like, is it okay for me to share with you, right? So like I said, if someone asks you like, hey, how are you doing? And then you're like, oh, I'm having a shitty day. They're like, I'm sorry, but like I have things to do, or I'm sorry and I want to hear about it, right? But it opens that door of conversation, and so it's finding that balance. And also I've been learning over time, you're teaching me, like, because sometimes I'm over vulnerable with people and that makes them feel uncomfortable and creates them, you know, either to feel like more closed off, and in the end I want to feel closer to people. And yes, vulnerability can also be a deterrent.
Yeah.
So it's finding that balance in who and how much I'm doing with everyone, and also where I'm acting from. Is it just because, you know, hey, I just want to see myself and share and da, or if like I really just want to be more authentic and I want to be more connected. And the two more things. And another small thing that really helps, like I said, is I think one of the biggest fears of vulnerability is that fear of being judged and perceived as weak. And just whenever I'm about to be vulnerable and that fear comes up, then remembering that most people around me that are going to be judging me is because they're judging themselves. And it's not because something is wrong with me, it's because something isn't sitting right for them. And just to remember that kind of empowers me. And if there's that judgment, then I can kind of see that hurt part of them and say like, hey, I want to give that a hug as well. And I see their pain and I see their fear as well. And it's if they're saying, oh, you're so weak or you're so silly or stupid for sharing this, then I know it's not true. And the last thing is the fears that I really believe, because this is what I'm learning over time, that one of our things as souls in a human body in this world is to face our fears. Now, many times fear is really an indication of danger. It could be, right? If I see a fire and I'm afraid to touch it because it's too hot, I'm not going to go into it. But many times it's deceiving, the fear. And many times you actually need to step in to that fear and be courageous, and that's where a lot of our growth, or at least a lot of my growth, has been.
Yeah.
And so yeah, because you mentioned fears before, so that's something.
Yeah, and I think of all the people, the famous one and the personal ones I met in my life that inspired me so much through their courage to step up and speak up. So taking us back to the beginning of the episode, I really feel like sharing your story was a great reminder of the ripple effect that you had on people when you shared your personal story, and you being able to step up in courage and share in vulnerability. What happened to you was actually empowering you and empowering others, connecting them to their stories, feeling like they're not alone in whatever they're going through. I think that's also something that was very resonating from your sharings. Like it became viral, and there was articles about it, and you got so many people writing you and messaging you and talking to you about what it did to them, and that's something also to remember when we do that. And I think maybe the final note is like, okay, we said so many things, so how can we help people who are just at the beginning of the journey, or maybe what we said touched them in a way and it's like, oh my god, I want to do that, but you're so far ahead of me, and how can I can't see myself do that. So I want to offer like small tips on how you can start experimenting with your vulnerability and creating that like safe ground for more openings and connections in your life. So I feel like one step is noticing like one thing in yourself that you want to share but you're afraid of, and it can be something very small. Maybe you're not ready to share big things, but even like you said, I'm not having the best day, so maybe practicing when somebody's asking you how are you, so just be more honest about it, and you don't have to go into the details, but just say, oh, today I'm not feeling great. So already that was a step into being more authentic to what you truly feel. Or think about like once a week sharing in a more vulnerable thing that is real for you right now to a friend or to someone you already feel safe with, but you can practice taking it to the next level. And I think slowly you'll start to create more safety in that space, and slowly you can start expanding and feeling how it feels. Does it feel good? Keep
and you
going.
will start attracting people who are supportive to this type of communication, and there will be people who may step away and leave, but those are the actual people you're frightened by to share, and that will attract. And I just wanted to say that we spoke a lot around vulnerability. It's many things, but the topics, sexual assault, crying, sadness, depression, that's one side of vulnerability. But I also want to invite like being happy and joyful. That is also being vulnerable. If that's what I'm feeling in the moment, but I don't want to cause a scene, I don't want to be too loud, I don't want to be too much over, then that's also a way that we're closing ourselves. But we can be courageous and be happy and joyful in those moments, and that just, so to pinpoint that is being truthful on the outside as to what is inside. Sharing and showing outside to others what I'm feeling inside.
And then that is, for me, in other words, liberation.
Yes.
Inner liberation. So with that note, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
It was a great episode, and I am happy to do that with you.
Thank you.
So I want to start this episode with a sharing/contemplating I've been having since we recorded the last 2 episodes. Basically, I'm trying to...
Santo?
It's a wrap. בטוחה שזה ייגע בהרבה אנשים.
You think?
אני בטוחה, הם ירגישו את הרגש שלך, אנשים יבכו.